3 in the morning and your phone buzzes with the usual alarm. But you've been awake for 20 minutes already, lying still in the dark, staring at the ceiling, not out of worry, because you just got an email and you want to read it one more time before your shift starts. It's the monthly cash flow report from the third business you bought 6 months ago, an industrial linen laundry service. The number on the screen is bigger than your entire monthly income at the warehouse. After every operating cost, every machine repair, every rent payment has already been subtracted. You lock the phone, put on the uniform with the company logo stitched over your chest, and drive to the warehouse like every other morning for the past 6 years. At the warehouse, you're the one scanning barcodes, stacking pallets, driving a forklift down aisles that stretch to the ceiling. Coworkers call you the quiet one. Your shift manager says you're reliable, on time, never complains. None of them know that the person pushing this forklift owns a stake in 5 different businesses, that some evenings you sit in your car in the parking lot, on the phone with your accountant, before the night shift even starts. You don't hide it out of fear. You hide it because if you said it out loud, every conversation would shift. People would ask questions, want advice, look at you differently, and you need the quiet to keep working. But there's a question that hangs over you every morning when you look at that number before clocking in. At what point does this warehouse job become just a habit and stop being a necessity? 3 years ago, that question didn't even exist in your head. 3 years ago, you were 27, working the same night shift at the same warehouse, earning $19 an hour, living in a 1-bedroom apartment split with a roommate to cut the rent. Your savings account held about $5,200, money you'd scraped together over nearly 2 years by skipping restaurants, keeping the same car, and picking up overtime whenever it was offered. You'd thought about flashier paths before. You read about crypto, about growth stocks, about people younger than you making returns that sounded like fiction, all within a few months. But one thing always stopped you before you tried. Every one of those paths required you to guess right about the future. You didn't trust your own ability to guess right. You trusted your ability to work steadily. The first decision came from a listing on a forum for small business owners looking to retire. A man in his 60s wanted to sell off a linen and towel delivery route serving small restaurants around the area. Unglamorous work nobody paid attention to, but it had run steadily for 20 years. The asking price was close to your entire savings, plus a small loan from someone you knew. For the first 3 months, you worked the night shift at the warehouse and drove the old delivery van early mornings before crawling home for a few hours of sleep, then back to work again. Your first profit, after gas, after vehicle maintenance, after outsourced laundering costs, came out to only a few $100s. But it was a few $100s that didn't come from your own hours at the warehouse. It came from a system that was starting to run on its own, even if it was still small and loosely held together. That feeling, watching money come in from somewhere other than your direct labor, changed how you saw work from that point forward. Looking back 3 years later, you realize everything started from a handful of principles you never set out to follow. You just absorbed them, one stumble at a time. The first principle, reinvest before you upgrade your life. It came from that very first profit. You'd been meaning to use part of it to replace a phone with a cracked screen you'd been living with for almost a year. Instead, you used it to hire a part-time delivery helper, which let the route expand to 2 more restaurants the following month. That cracked phone stayed with you for almost another year. The second principle, never let your spending grow faster than your cash flow. You watched a few people you knew running small side businesses, and the moment they saw a little extra profit, they'd upgrade a car, buy a nicer watch, and then when one big customer walked away, they had nothing left to fall back on. You kept the same 1-bedroom apartment for the first 2 years, even after your income had grown many times over. The third principle, never take on 2 of the same risk at once. That lesson came later, when you nearly bought 2 businesses back to back that both depended on the same type of customer, small restaurants in the same part of town. If that area took an economic hit, both businesses would go down together. You pulled out of one of the deals, and later, when that area really did face a downturn, you were relieved you hadn't put both bets in the same basket. The fourth principle, learn the paperwork before you sign anything. This was the most expensive lesson of the 3 years, and it shows up in the next part of this story. By month 8, the linen delivery route had stabilized, bringing in steady monthly income, modest as the number still was once you subtracted vehicle costs, fuel, and outside labor. You started eyeing a second opportunity, a small automated car wash on the edge of town, where the previous owner wanted to sell for health reasons. You used part of the linen route's profit plus another small loan to buy it, and for the first time you felt like you weren't just an employee anymore. You were someone running 2 systems in parallel. By month 15, one of the 2 main car wash machines broke down badly, right in the middle of the busiest weekend of the year, peak summer demand. You had to choose between an expensive rush repair or closing for a week to wait for cheaper parts. You chose the rush repair, and that expense nearly wiped out the entire quarter's profit. This was the first time you really felt that owning a business isn't a one-way flow of cash. It's unexpected costs that can land at any moment, from equipment maintenance to emergency repairs, the kind of thing that never shows up in the numbers you'd once daydreamed about. In year 2, you expanded into a small equipment rental service, aimed at landscaping crews in the area. This business grew faster than expected, monthly revenue climbing noticeably. But revenue isn't profit. After equipment insurance, business taxes, repair costs, and the unpaid hours you personally spent inspecting every piece of gear before renting it out, what was left was far smaller than the number that had gotten you excited in the first place. Also in year 2, you hired your first manager to oversee the car wash when you couldn't be there. That person did well for the first 2 months, then started showing up late, then stopped showing up at all without notice. It took you nearly a month to find a replacement, during which you were running between 3 different locations, before and after your warehouse shifts. By year 3, you had your eye on a 4th and 5th business almost at the same time, a small appliance repair shop and a nighttime office cleaning service. With the appliance repair deal, you nearly signed based on the numbers the seller handed you, until you personally cross-checked the books from the last 3 months and found actual revenue was significantly lower than what had been presented. You renegotiated, spent nearly 3 weeks in tense back and forth, and ended up buying it for well below the original asking price. The lesson about checking the paperwork yourself before trusting a seller's word was carved into how you did business from then on. What most people don't say out loud is that most people who start down this path stop right after the first setback, or the second, not because they're less capable than the ones who keep going. They're simply not there anymore when the next opportunity shows up. The cost of those 3 years wasn't in the numbers lost on any single deal. It was in the things that can't be measured in dollars. You missed a close friend's wedding because it fell on the same day you had to be there to receive delivery of the appliance repair equipment. You skipped a family holiday gathering because you were dealing with a breakdown at the car wash. Your old roommate, the one who'd shared that apartment with you through the early years, slowly stopped inviting you out on weekends, not out of anger, but because you kept saying no, again and again, until they stopped asking. Some nights after your warehouse shift, you'd sit in your car, too drained to head home right away, just staring out at the dark, empty parking lot, wondering if any of this was actually worth it, or if it was just an elaborate way of avoiding the fact that you were exhausted. No one around you really understood what you were doing, not because you kept it locked away in secrecy, but because you chose not to talk about it, and that choice meant no one could share the weight with you. There were months when every number on paper looked good, profits climbing, every business running smoothly, and you'd still lie awake at midnight, wondering if you were trading the only years of your youth you'd ever get for numbers that could vanish after one bad economic shock outside your control. By the end of year 3, someone in the industry, the same person who'd once helped you evaluate your first deal, brought you an offer. A small investment fund that specialized in rolling up local service businesses wanted to buy your entire 5-business portfolio at once, at a price high enough to let you quit the warehouse immediately and live comfortably for years without doing another day of work. Around the same time, your shift manager at the warehouse, who still thought of you as just a hardworking regular employee, offered to promote you to night shift supervisor, a more stable job, better pay than your current $19 an hour, the exact kind of milestone you'd once dreamed about 3 years earlier. You stood between two completely opposite choices: sell everything for a large lump sum and immediate freedom, accepting that most of what you'd built over 3 years would pass into someone else's hands, or turn down both offers, keep the whole system, keep operating it, keep carrying the risk, keep living two parallel lives a while longer, betting that the value would keep growing. You didn't choose the perfectly safe path, and you didn't choose to walk away completely either. You turned down the promotion at the warehouse, and you turned down the offer to sell the entire portfolio. Instead, you sold off just one business, the riskiest one, the one that fit least with how you wanted to operate long-term, kept the other 4, and used the proceeds from that single sale to pay off every remaining loan. It wasn't a triumphant moment, it was a careful decision, carrying both relief and a quiet trace of regret, because you knew you'd left a much larger sum on the table by not selling everything. Looking back at the whole journey, what stands out isn't a formula for getting rich fast, because none of it was fast at all. What stands out is that owning boring businesses, the kind nobody brings up in flashy success stories, turned out to be exactly where the competition was thinnest, and exactly where personal discipline made the clearest difference. You gave up a lot of rest, a few relationships that used to feel close, and 3 years that could have been far easier if you'd simply gone to work, come home, and thought about nothing else. In return, you got an income system no longer entirely dependent on your own direct labor, and a quiet confidence that if the warehouse job disappeared tomorrow, your life wouldn't collapse along with it. Your co-workers at the warehouse still don't know any of this. To them, you're still the one pushing the forklift, scanning barcodes, quiet, punctual. Maybe they never will know, or maybe one day you'll tell them, once everything is steady enough that it doesn't need explaining anymore. The question left, not for the person in this story, but for you watching right now. If it meant 3 years with almost no free time, no one to share it with, in exchange for an income system independent of your main job, would you take that path? Or do you think the price ends up costing more than what you get back?